Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtaki Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girem yatripadamam vande Shivradina Karanam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna, thank you for joining. So Monday we had completed the 29th chapter of the 4th canto. And today we will start with the 30th chapter titled The Activities of the Prachetas. The chapter has 51 verses. And as the title suggests, the focus now moves back to the Prachetas. And the general flow of the chapter is that we see the Prachetas finishing their 10,000 years of us chanting the Rudra Gita. They get audience from Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu then actually glorifies the Prachetas. And after that, there is the praise from the Prachetas, the benedictions that the Prachetas ask, and then the response from the Lord. Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Before this, we thought we will do summary of 29, I think. No?
We will do summary. You are actually right, Prabhu. So thank you for reminding. Okay, so doing a summation on the 29th chapter, the talks between Narad Muni and King Rachinabari. So the previous chapter, the 28th chapter, had ended with the allegorical story completing. The allegorical story essentially had the descriptions of King Puranjan, his death, his rebirth as Vaidarbhi, getting married to Malyadhwaja, the liberation of Malyadhwaja, and the consequent liberation of Vaidarbhi. So we see that this chapter begins with Narad Muni elaborating on the allegory. And we have done that. Puranjan says that, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. He has spoken in indirect terms. So Narad Muni then explains the allegory that Puranjan is the jiva, Puranjani is the mind, the city of 9 gates is the body, and the different entities are. There's a table that I have sent that actually gives a high-level view of the allegory. Described in that is also the allegory of the chariot. So Puranjan one goes, sits in the chariot to go hunting, and how the chariot represents various aspects of the conditioned jiva. And then the allegory of the attack by Chandvega. The Chandvega sister, then Jara, essentially the attack of old age and time on the body. So in the first 25 verses, Narad he gives a brief elaboration on the allegory. So as we had noted, that Narad Muni essentially talks mostly about the symbolism, that this stands for this stands for that. He does not really expand how the symbols come together and create a message. The Acharyas have done that, Srila Prabhupada has done that. And the understanding is that Prachinabhari, obviously being a highly intelligent person, could himself stitch the symbols together and extract the message from the allegory. So the essential message in the allegory is how the jiva is attracted by the pleasures that are promised by the mind. And because of that attraction, it needs to take a material body through which he enjoys. And the mind mostly guides the jiva in the mode of goodness. There are times when the jiva may deviate in the mode to sinful activities. But the understanding is that's not the intrinsic nature of intelligence. And then Prabhupada makes this point that even the mode of goodness is tamasic, because essentially it binds one. So then Prachinabhari enjoying over there is essentially the jiva enjoying in the body, guided by the mind in a pious way, but fails to see the influence of time. So in that enjoyment, the body expands into children and grandchildren and families. So the scope of enjoyment expands. And while that is going on, the jiva fails to note the influence of time. So the five-headed serpent, which is the Panchapranas, are guarding the body from the constant attack of Chandrika. Time is constantly attacking. And eventually they get weakened, at which time the body is destroyed. And then the jiva gets, in the allegorical story, Prachinabhari takes birth as Vaidarbhi. Now, as Vaidarbhi, she is married with Malayadhwaja, who is a spiritually exalted personality. So that allegory represents the jiva taking shelter of a spiritual master. And by consistent service to the spiritual master, the disciple is able to reach the same destination. We see that even though Vaidarbhi does not have the same qualifications as Chandrika, but because of her faithful service to her husband, when he dies, she also attains the same destination. So this concludes the description of the allegory. Narad Muni then begins to preach directly to Prachinabhari. So he talks about the description of the material world. So from verse 26 onwards, he talks about the cause of the fall of the jiva, the original sin, so to speak, which is the jiva forgetting the Lord, and then acquiring the modes. And depending on which mode, sometimes the jiva is in a heaven, sometimes it's in the earthly planet, sometimes it's in the animal kingdom. So different bodies, different places, different combination of modes. Narad Muni says that just like a wandering dog. Sometimes the dog is at high places, low places, getting good food, bad food, sometimes being petted, sometimes kicked. Similarly, the jiva is wandering through different situations. And while the jiva is wandering through different situations, he's constantly trying to counteract the miseries. And Narmuni gives an example of a person carrying a burden on the shoulder, and the shoulder pains, and then he moves it to another shoulder, the second shoulder. So there is some sense of relief, but essentially the second shoulder is also his shoulder, and then that starts paining, and then he moves it back to the shoulder. So that's what material relief is. Like you turn the suffering from one position to another, but the suffering always stays. So now, if you see in this instructions, Narad Muni is using the allegory to give direct instructions. Right? First, he instructed allegorically. Now, the instructions are not different from the allegorical story, but he's extracting the essence of the allegory, and now he's instructing. And we discussed how the preachers do this. That when the heart of the recipient is not open, they will not take to strong direct instructions. So they're instructed in a more indirect way. But after hearing the story, Prachina Bhari's heart is open now. So now Narad Muni is giving him direct instructions. So he describes the prevalent misery in the material world, and then he offers bhakti as a solution. The only remedy is to surrender to Krishna. And now at this point, he's instructing based on the Malay Dhwaja allegory, that he says that bhakti should be done through Guru, and without that, detachment and knowledge is impossible. Right? So he also, Narad Muni, instructs Prachina Bhari on the importance of executing bhakti under the guidance of the Guru. How to do bhakti? Narad Muni then, he glorifies Shravana Kirtana. He says that hearing leads to seeing the Lord. And Krishna Katha is the ultimate prasad of the exalted devotees. So just like when an exalted devotee eats something, the remnants of the food is considered to be purifying. Similarly, when they do Krishna Katha, they are essentially chewing the pastime and presenting it. Like Sukadeva Goswami is described as sweeten the Bhagavatam by internalizing it and speaking it. So Krishna Katha is directly coming in contact with the mercy of the devotees through their prasad. So after having given these two direct instructions, now Narad Muni, he gives specific actionable instructions. So far Narad Muni is speaking philosophically. First he's speaking indirectly, now he's speaking directly, philosophically. Now he's giving actionable instructions to Prachina Bhari. Right? So he says that you stop this karma kanda. Right? So at one point he says that you are a foolish person to have sacrificed so many animals. So you immediately stop all this karma kanda, take shelter of the Supreme Lord. And by the worship of the Lord, you will attain perfection. So having said that, Narad Muni notes that Prachina Bhari is still, he's convinced, but he's still hesitant to act on it immediately. So then he gives the last allegory, which is that of the deer, how the deer is grazing peacefully in the grass, unaware that there is a hunter stalking him and there is a lion waiting to kill him, with the understanding that the jiva may think that they have time left to do, but death could happen anytime. Now, following this, Prachinabhari, he asks some questions of Narad Muni, that I have been instructed all my life about the importance of pious activities by my teachers. And what is the proof that this instructions that have given to me actually work? Give me proof that transmigration works. Give me proof that the law of karma works. Now, it seems to be a little bit of a deviation, because Narad Muni is asking him to give up Karma Kand and take to Bhakti, and he's asking proof for Karma Kand. But ultimately, we'll see that the reason he's asking proof for Karma Kand to once again establish the fact that Bhakti is the only way to break this cycle of Karma Kand. So when Narad Muni answers about the transmigration of soul, he will make this point that the gross body is destroyed, the subtle body is eternal, the subtle body carries impressions, activities create impressions, and impressions create activities. So this cycle is perpetuated by the subtle body from one gross body to another. And the gross body is never destroyed. Right? So what is the message that comes out of this? That the cycle of karma can never be destroyed, or at least not through karma itself. And he goes through more technicality of how to prove that the subtle body, talking about the dreaming state and past memories. But essentially, this is the message that he said, that because the subtle body is eternal, because the subtle body will always carry the results of your pious activities, because the subtle body will always influence your future activities, karma is self-perpetuating and can never be destroyed. But he says there is one thing that can be used to destroy this cycle, which is bhakti. Right? So one way or the other, it comes down to bhakti. Now Prachinabhari is fully convinced, not only about the message, but also about the urgency of it. So without even waiting for his sons to return, he leaves instructions for them with his ministers, immediately leaves the palace, departs for the forest. There he leads a renounced life filled with austerity, and finally attains Sarupya Mukti. The chapter ends with the Falashruti, that one who hears this pastime gets liberation from the subtle body. This pastime sanctifies the whole material world and elevates one to the spiritual world, and it relieves one of bodily conception and clears all doubts. So with this chapter, the section of Prachinabhari ends. And now Maitreya's attention once again comes to the Prachetas. So if you remember, Maitreya was speaking about Prachetas, and he had left at a point where the Prachetas had received the Rudra Gita, gotten into the water, and started performing austerities. And Narad Muni, he quickly goes over to Prachinabhari's palace, and then the last 4 chapters, I believe, were the dialogue with Prachinabhari. Now Prachinabhari's pastime is finished, and Maitreya's attention will come back to what's going on with the Prachetas. So this is a high-level summary of the more than 85 verses in the chapter. Anybody has any questions or comments? We can take it now. Okay. So we'll start with the 30th chapter. As I mentioned, this chapter is the activities of the Prachetas. Verse 1. Let's see. Paramatma Prabhu, will you be able to do the translations?
Yes, I have to use my headphone because
Thank you, Prabhu.
I have to use my head.
Computer is not working. It's okay.
Vidurvacha ye tvaya vihita brahman sutaha prachina barishaha te rudragitena harim siddhim apuhu pratoshikam.
Translation, Vidura inquired from Maitreya, O Brahmana, you formerly spoke about the sons of Prachinabhari and informed me that they satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead by chanting a song composed by Lord Shiva. What did they achieve in this way?
Okay, so in response to Vidur's question, Maitreya will now describe the activities of the Prachetas. So this is exactly 6 chapters after. So in the 24th chapter, we see Lord Shiva reciting the Ridra Gita to the Prachetas, and then they're following his instruction. Now in 30th chapter, the attention again comes back to the Prachetas. These are the last 2 chapters of the 4th canto. This chapter has 51 verses. The next chapter has 31 verses. And they are completely focused on the activities of the Prachetas. Srila Prabhupada, he notes the rarity of such endeavors like the Prachetas. Prabhupada says that Siddham Apuhu, or they achieved perfection. Right? He quotes Bhagavad Gita Manushanam Sahasresu Kashchiyati Siddhya. Out of many millions of people, one person gets it. He quotes 850 Mamopetya Punarjanma. That is the supreme success that one gets. Verse 2. Kim baraspatyeha paratravata kevalyanatha priyapashvavartanaha asadya devam girisham yadrachaya prapu param nunam mataprachetashaha.
Sorry. My dear Barhaspatya, what did the sons of King Bharisat, known as the Prachetas, obtain after meeting Lord Shiva, who is very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the bestower of liberation? Certainly, they were transformed to the spiritual world. But apart from that, what did they obtain within this material world, either in this life or in other lives?
So here we see that Vidur is addressing Maitreya as Baharaspatya, disciple of Brahaspati. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad says that it is well known that Uddhav and Maitreya became disciples of Brahaspati to obtain some particular knowledge. Doesn't say which knowledge, but judging by the personalities, it was obviously spiritual knowledge. So we also know that Maitreya was one of the principal disciples of Parashar Muni. And that's how he was a contemporary and a friend of Srila Vyasadeva. And in the 4th canto, 7th chapter, Maitreya himself talks about Uddhav. He says that when he talks about the the yajna by Daksha, he said, I heard this story from Uddhav. And he described Uddhav, who's a great devotee and a disciple of Brahaspati. Right, so both of them are disciples of Brahaspati. In this verse, Vidur is asking Maitreya about the different achievements of the Prachetas. The Prabhupada says that all types of material happiness are obtained in this life or next, on this planet or on another. The distress and happiness obtained during the span of life are called iha. And the distress and happiness obtained in the next life are called paratra. So, Vidur is asking about the iha paratra of the Prachetas. That what is the distress and happiness they achieved during this time, and in what was the destination in their next birth. Prabhupada also notes the role of Lord Shiva. So he says that typically Lord Shiva, he is approached for material opulence. And Lord Shiva gives boons with two different frames of mind. Sometimes he will give out of obligation and sometimes he will give out of affection. So when somebody is performing austerities, somebody is following the rules of the scriptures and earning the right to get an opulence, get a benediction, then out of obligation, Prabhupada says because he is the husband of Durga Devi, he is her controller, so he grants boons. But when he really favors someone, then out of affection, he grants boons even if they don't ask for it. So this is one case that the Prachetas did not really ask for the boon. But he says, I'm so attracted by your good qualities that I am willingly giving you a boon out of affection. Does anybody know what is one other prominent situation where Lord Shiva gave similar mood without being asked out of affection? He gave a boon to a personality. So this will appear later in the Bhagavatam, which is the interaction with Markandeya Rishi. That when Markandeya Rishi was performing a meditation, then Parvati Devi said, go and give him some benediction. And Lord Shiva was standing in front of him, but Markandeya Rishi was so deep in his meditation that he was unaware of what was going on. Then by his yogic powers, Lord Shiva entered his meditation and brought him back. And Markandeya Rishi immediately fell to his feet, washed his lotus feet. And then, of course, Lord Shiva gives him the benediction that he says, you will live until the until the end of the day of Brahma. You will live for that long. And he also benedicted him with devotional service. So Prabhupada says that when Lord Shiva is really giving benediction out of affection, he will give bhakti. But when he's giving out of obligation, he will give bhakti. In the previous verse, it was mentioned that siddhim mapuhu, that they attain perfection. Right? So there are many material perfections, but the real perfection is attaining the Lord. So Vidur is taking that for granted. So he himself is a devotee. He knows that the Prachetas following the instructions of Lord Shiva are going to get liberated. But in the mood of a devotee, he's inquisitive. Give me more details. It's like somebody says that there was a cricket match and India won over Australia. For somebody, that may be enough. But for one who's like a cricket fan, he would say, okay, who made the highest score? And how much did this player make? And how did this bowler, how many wickets? So want more and more details, even though they know what the conclusion is. So same mode Vidur has, that he is asking for more details, not really about whether they attain liberation or not. They're going to get liberation, but give me more about their activities. Okay. Verse 3. Maitre vacha prachetas antar udaddau piturade shakarnaha japayagena tapasa puranjanam atoshayam.
The great sage Maitreya said, the sons of King Prachinabhari, known as the Prashetas, underwent severe austerities within the seawater to carry out the order of their father. By chanting and repeating the mantras given by Lord Shiva, they were able to satisfy Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the importance of following acharyas in the disciplic succession. So he makes this point, interesting point, because practicing devotees also ask these questions that can I recite my own prayers to the Lord? Can I write my own prayers and recite them? And Prabhupada says that yes, one can compose and pray spontaneously to the Lord, but also recommended is to repeat the prayers composed by the previous acharya. He said that is a lot more potent. Why is it more potent? Because that's what the previous acharyas themselves have done. That's what the disciplic succession has done. And from a practical perspective, the prayers of the devotees not only carry their realizations, also carries their mercy. So one is repeating the prayers, then one is borrowing their realizations. One may not have those realizations himself or herself, but one is borrowing those realizations, and one is also getting access to the mercy of the devotee. Right. So Lord Brahma prayed to Lord Vishnu at the creation of the universe, the Brahma Samhita. And to this day, devotees repeat the prayers of Lord Brahma. So Prabhupada writes that that the pure devotee never attempts to reach the Supreme Lord directly. The most important way is to go through the disciplic succession. The prayers offered by Lord Shiva to the personality of Godhead were thus repeated by the Prachetas, who were thus very successful in pleasing the Supreme Lord. Right? Prabhupada makes this point that repeating the prayers is another way of being connected to the Parampara. Now, this does not mean that one does not compose and recite one's own prayers, or even without composing, one can have prayers, but that has to be done in addition to the recitation of standard prayers. In this verse, if you see in the last line, so it is said, Jape Gena Tapasa Puranjanam Atoshaya. So in the allegorical story that Narad had recited to Prachinabhari, the Jiva was Puranjan. Right? So, and we had said how the word Puranjan comes by. So Pura means residence, right? Like we have Mayapur. So Pur means like Jagannath Puri. So Pur is residence, and Jana refers to person. Right? So Puranjan refers to a person residing. So Prabhupada says that according to Madhavacharya, the living entity is called Puranjan because he is an inhabitant of this material world. Right? When he says that the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, he also creates this material world and he also enters it. And Prabhupada quotes from Brahma Samhita, Andartasthana Paramanu Chayantrasthana, that the Lord enters in the heart of every living entity and within every matter. So therefore, both the living entity and the Lord are called Puranjan. Can anybody share that? Where is this point made in the Bhagavad Gita? Just a chapter should be sufficient. So we see that in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna asked Krishna the 6 questions, Kshetra, Kshetrakya, Purusha, Prakriti, and Kal and Karma. So we're talking about Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities. Krishna says there are 2 Kshetragyas, the soul and the super soul. Both of them are the knowers of field of activities. One knows only their own body and the other knows everything. Right? So both of them are Puranjan. It is the duty of one Puranjan to serve the other Puranjan. Right? It's the duty of the Jiva Puranjan to serve the Lord Puranjan. So just because they are both Puranjan, they don't come at the same level. Right? Just because 2 people are living in the same house does not mean that they are the same. One could be the master, the other could be the servant. So here it's also mentioned that the sons of Prachinabhari, known as Prachetas, underwent severe austerities. Japa Yagena Tapasa. Right? So the Prachetas satisfied the Lord by chanting. So even though there is Yagena Tapasa, they were under the water for 10,000 years, they are considered to be secondary functions. The real devotional service they performed was Japa Yagya, the sacrifice of chanting the holy names as given by Lord Shiva. Okay, moving on to verse 4. Dasavarsha sahasrante purushas tu sanatana teshama virabhut krishram shantena samayan rucha.
At the end of the 10,000 years of severe austerities performed by the Prashetas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to reward their austerities, appeared before them in his very pleasing form. They appealed this appealed to the Prashetas and satisfied the labor of their austerities.
So this is the nature of the Lord, that when the devotees are eager to see him, in this case the eagerness is being expressed through the hard work and austerity that they perform, then the Lord becomes also eager to reciprocate. Right? In the 3rd canto, we see that when Lord Brahma, he performed austerities for 1,000 celestial years, then immediately Garbhodaksha Vishnu appears before him. Right? And chapter 8, verse 27, 3rd canto, when Garbhodaksha Vishnu appears, then he smiles at Brahma, vanquishing all his distress. So that is the ecstasy of the devotee. That is the prasadam. Just seeing the smile of the devotee. So what is austerity? Austerity is giving pains to the self. So what does it mean? that one is accepting pain to give pleasure to Krishna. And in that, one finds even more pleasure. Right? So I'll say that again, that the giving pain is an intermediate step. So the devotees take pleasure in giving pain to themselves so that they can give pleasure to the Lord. So essentially, the pain is a transient step. So the devotees take pleasure in giving pleasure to the Lord. The via media may be pain, but it is from the perspective of the devotee, that is insignificant. Bhakti is taking pleasure in giving pleasure to the Lord and the devotees. The austerities and pains are a means to an end, and they're continuously eclipsed by the pleasure of the reciprocation by the Lord and his devotees. Now, one might say that bhakti does not mean austerities. It does mean austerities, but different kinds of austerities. The devotees do austerities. That they fast on Ekadashi, they chant, they control the tongue. The biggest austerity of the devotee is subtle, right? They take a humble position. That's the biggest austerity. It's easy to fast. It's easy to take cold water baths, but it's very difficult to go in front of a person and operate from a level of das, anudas, anudas. The devotees do that, austerities. The Prabhupada says that the personality of Godhead appreciated the austerities undergone by the Prachetas and finally appeared in the pleasing form. Thus, they all became satisfied and forgot the austerities they underwent. In the material world, if one is successful after hard work, he is very much pleased. Similarly, the devotees forget all the austerities when they come in contact with the personality of Godhead. Prabhupada also notes in the purport that the Prachetas did 10,000 years of austerities. But that is only possible in the Satyuga when the people lived long lives for 100,000 years, and they were set. Their body also had the strength. Their minds had the strength to perform austerities. Right? And from the perspective of Satyuga, 10,000 years is like 10 years in Kali. So just like a training period, because it's not that the 10,000, at the end of the 10,000 years, the Pracheta's life finished. No, we'll see later on, they lived for a very long life after that. They ruled, they had a child, they had a son, and then they went back to body. So the 10,000 years is simply like somebody going to school, getting the education, and then spending rest of their life working, making advancements. Prabhupada writes in the purport that because the people of this age have fallen, the Lord is kind enough to give them the easiest method. Right? So he says this, even 10 years of austerity is not possible in the age of Kali. So what is the alternative? Chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Verse 5. Suparna skandham marudo meru shrangam mivambudaha pitava samani griva kurvan viti miradishaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead appearing on the shoulder of Garuda seemed like a cloud resting on the summit of the mountain known as Meru. The transcendental body of the personality of Godhead was covered by attractive yellow garments, and his neck was decorated with the jewel known as Kaustubhamani. The bodily effulgence of the Lord dissipated all the darkness of the universe.
So in 3 verses, 5, 6, and 7, there is a description of the Lord. So here it is mentioned, so the word that is used over here is Suparna Skandam Arudha. So Suparna, so Parna means punk, wings, and Su means good. So Suparna together means good wings, and it is referring to Garuda. So it is said that when the wings of Garud flap, then the sound that comes from it is the chant, is the Vedic hymns. That in the third canto, Lord Kapila, when he is describing for a yogi how to meditate on the Lord, he says, Uru Suparna Bhujayorathi, that the Lord is carried on the shoulders of Suparna, of Garud. Similarly, when Kardam Muni, he performed 10,000 years of austerities, and Lord Vishnu came, he gave him benedictions, and then he went away. And then Kardam Muni is standing there and is listening to so there it is said that the flapping wings of Garuda were vibrating the Sam Veda. So, and Kardam Muni was listening to it. So what happens when the Lord comes on Garuda? Vitmir Dishaha. Disha means directions, and Vitmira means that he dissipated the darkness in all directions. What kind of darkness? The darkness in the heart of a jiva. His body is effulgent, so it dissipates darkness in a material realm, but really speaking, the appearance of the Lord, it dissipates the darkness within the heart of a devotee, or it dissipates the distress of separation in the heart of the devotee. Prabhupada quotes from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, the Krishna Surya Sam, Maya Hoya Andhakar. Yahan Krishna, Tahan Nahi, Maya Adhikar. Like Krishna is like the sun and Maya is like darkness. Where there is Krishna, there is no Maya. Right? And Prabhupada gives two more quotes. And in this chapter, I've noticed that Prabhupada it gives a lot of references, multiple references for the same point. Like here, he gives 3 references for the fact that Krishna is like sunlight and dissipates darkness. He quotes from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, and he quotes Bhagavad Gita 7.8, and the Lord says, Prabhashmi Shashi Suryo, that I am the sun and the moon. And then he quotes Brahma Samhita, Yasya Prabha Prabhato Jagadanda Koti Koti Shveshwara Sudadi Vibhuti Binna. So how by the bodily effulgence, everybody is being freed from darkness. Okay, moving on to the next verse. Kashishuna Kanaka Varna Vibhushananena Bharajat Kapol Vadano Vilasat Kirtaha Ashtayudher Anucharer Munubi Surendrera Asave Tugarud Kinnar Gita Kirtihi.
The Lord's face was very beautiful, and his head was decorated with a shining helmet and golden ornaments. His helmet was dazzling and was very beautifully situated on his head. The Lord had 8 arms, which each held a particular weapon. The Lord was surrounded by demigods, great sages, and other associates. These were all engaged in his service. Garuda, the carrier of the Lord, glorified the Lord with Vedic hymns by flapping his wings. Garuda appeared to be an inhabitant of the planet known as Kinara Loka.
So we see how Maitreya and speakers in the Bhagavatam, they have this unique ability of painting a picture with words. Right? So if you see, if you absorb the flow of these verses, there's a description of the Lord. Then it goes a little bit around that how his body is looking like. He has 8 arms, each arm has a weapon. Then go further, what's around the Lord? Demigods, great sages, all engaged in the service. Further around, he's sitting on Garuda, his wings are flapping, the Sam Veda and other Vedas are being recited, right? So you can almost imagine through the words, you can see the Prachetas standing and the Lord coming in front of the Prachetas, sitting on the back of Garuda. So one thing interesting in this verse is that the Lord is typically described as Chaturbhuja. Here he is described as Ashtayudher, that he has 8 arms. And Prabhupada says that whatever is in his hand can be considered to be a weapon. If he has 4 hands, there are 4 kinds of weapons. And if he has extra 4 hands, they will hold an arrow, bow, trident, and snake. And so even though we say Shank, Chakra, Gada, Padma. So Shank and Padma are not considered to be weapons. They are medias of benediction. But whatever there is in the hand of the Lord, it can be considered as a weapon. One is to destroy the miscreants, and one is to destroy the illusion. When Dhruv Maharaj was tongue-tied, then he touched him with the Shankha, and immediately his ignorance was destroyed. So that was the weapon that the Lord used. So Prabhupada quotes that V. Raghavacharya describes the 8 weapons as Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, Sharanga, Sara, etc. So the etc. is 2 more weapons, which is the shield and the sword. Right? So Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, that we all know. Sharang is the bow of the Lord. And Shara is the trident. And typically the Lord also, when he is 8 armed, he holds a shield and a sword. So the other time in the Bhagavatam, where the Lord appears in an 8-armed form, there may be other times, but this is the other time that I know, is when Prajapati Daksha, he completes his yajna. Right, so Lord Shiva cut his head, or Veerbhadra cut his head off, Lord Shiva gave him a goat head, then he performed the yajna, and then the Lord comes. So the 4th canto, 7th chapter. Then the Lord is in his Ashtabhuja form. And there it is described that in his 8 hands he held a conch shell, wheel, club, lotus flower, arrow, bow, shield, and sword. So in addition to that, the Lord is described as being accompanied by several sages, by Indra and other associates. So Prabhupada in the translation, the last line, he says that Garuda appeared to be an inhabitant of the planet known as Kinarloka. Vishwanath Chakravarti translates this a little differently. He says that the Supreme Lord was glorified by Garuda and the inhabitants of Kinarloka. So Kinarloka, as you know, Kinnaras are they are celestial musicians. So they are portrayed as partly human and partly bird. Right? So they have a face and a torso of a human, and the lower body part is that of a bird. And the male are known as Kinnaras, the female are known as Kinnaris. Right? So Vishnu Chakravarti says that he appeared with the Kinnaras. Prabhupada translates it that he appeared with Garuda, who appeared to be inhabited. So the reason Prabhupada makes this translation is because the Kinnaras are expert musicians. And because by the flapping of the wings of Garuda, the pleasing hymns of the Vedas were being sounded, just just like the expert music of the Kinnara. So that's why Garuda can be considered to be or appeared like an inhabitant of Kinnarloka. So Prabhupada talks a little bit more about the Kinnar. So he says that the bodily features are like that of a human being, but they have wings. The word Geet Kirti indicates that the inhabitants of Kinnarloka are very expert in singing the glories of the Lord. In the Brahma Samhita it says, Jagadanda Kote Kote Sheshva Vasudadi Vibhuti Bindam. In each and every universe, there are different types of planets, and each planet has distinctive features. On the strength of this verse, we can understand that in Kinnarlok, the inhabitants can fly with their wings. There's also a planet known as Siddhalok, where the inhabitants can fly even without wings. Thus, each and every planet has some distinctive facility. That is the beauty of the varied creation of the personality of Godhead. In India, colloquially, Kinnars are eunuchs. So I'm not sure how this association came by, but in normal colloquial usage, the Kinnars are those who are transvestites. They're transgenders. Okay, we'll do one more verse, and after that we'll pause for any discussion. Verse 7. Vinayatasthabhuja mandal madhya lakshmaya smardak chirya parivrato vanamala malayadhya bharismatah purusha ahasutan prapannana parajanyanada rutaya sagrana valokaha.
Around the neck of the personality of Godhead hung a flower garland that reached his knees. His 8 stout and elongated arms were decorated with that garland, which challenged the beauty of the goddess of fortune. With a merciful glance and a voice like thunder, the Lord addressed the sons of King Prachinabharisat, who were very much surrendered unto him.
So we see that the Lord here is described as Adhya. So Adhya means the cause of all causes, the original personality of Godhead. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives 4 references to collaborate the fact that Krishna is the cause of all causes. Right? So he gives a reference of 1427 Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi Pratishtama. He says that I am the basis of the impersonal Brahma. He gives 1012 Param Brahma Param Dhama, that the glorification by Arjun. Then he gives the reference from the famous Brahma Samhita verse 5.1, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha. And then he gives reference from Vedanta Sutta, Janmadhyasyataha, that the absolute truth is that from which everyone emanates. So what we notice is that wherever there is an opportunity, Srila Prabhupada, there are some facts that Srila Prabhupada will always try to make. And this is emphasis through repetition. He will always try to make this point that the Lord is personal. Then the fact that Lord is the cause of all causes. Then the potency of bhakti and the dismal nature of the material world. These are 3 or 4 things that Srila Prabhupada will whenever the verse offers him the opportunity, he will point that out. He talks about bhakti, especially Sankirtan Yagya, Japa in the age of Kali, in several verses. Talk about the fact that Lord is a person, and the fact that Lord is the original cause of all causes. And here he says the absolute truth is described as Adi Purusha. The absolute truth is therefore a person and is not impersonal. Right? So when we see such a detailed description of the Lord's form, associates, and paraphernalia, it has to point to the personal form of the Lord. That's another reason why the devotees, they give such detailed description. Like when you see the description of Vaikuntha, so much of detail is given over there. Not only of the Lord, but of the surrounding, the trees, the water, the inhabitants. The point is that if the bees and the frogs over there are personal, then the Lord has to be personal. And if there are rooms and stairs, and if there is throne, somebody has to be using the rooms, climbing the stairs, and sitting on the throne. If the devotees are doing Chamar Seva, somebody has to be sitting and receiving that Chamar Seva. Right? If Garuda is carrying somebody on his back, then somebody has to be a person. So sometimes directly this point is made, sometimes the point is made indirectly by these elaborate descriptions that will inevitably make this image in your mind, solidify this image in your mind that the Lord is a person. The Prabhupada says seeing the Lord is a great, rare privilege. And then he says the Lord can be seen in the form of a deity, he can be seen in the form of the holy name, and he can be seen in the form of scriptures. So devotees are therefore considered to be extremely fortunate because they are constantly seeing the Lord. Whether it's taking darshan of the deities, whether it's chanting the holy name, whether it is reading the scriptures, that way they are considered to be the most fortunate. Okay, so let me pause here and see if there is any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I was discussing someone yesterday only about the personality of Godhead and why is it necessary God has to be a person? That's what his question was. Why is it necessary God has to be a person? Why can't we simply consider impersonal aspect of God? So what would be the appropriate answer? I kind of fumbled, but I don't know whether I answered it correctly. But what would be the response for that? If a person asks, how can God be a person? Then we can explain. But why God has to be a person? If he's asking like that, his point is that is it because we have to develop love for God? That's why we consider God as a person. Because impersonally you cannot develop love. But I said, no, that's not the truth. The truth is God is a person according to scripture. And that's the loving relationship. That's what we have to develop, a loving relationship to him. It's not because we have to develop loving relationship that God is a person. So what would be your answer to that?
That would be my answer, Prabhu. That I think the first answer that you gave, that since we have not seen the Lord, we are seeing him through the eyes of the scriptures. Then the scriptures describe the Lord as being a person. And because he is a person, then everything that related to a person comes into play. Having personal relationship, having a wife, having friendly interchanges, having a throne to sit on, all that comes in because he's a person, not the other way around there. Some other points that Prabhupada would make is that the fact that each one of us is a person points to the fact that the Lord is a person, basically empirical extrapolation. So it's a Prabhupada quote from the Bible saying that Lord created man in his image. Right. So we would quote that and say, because the Lord is a person, He has created us as a person. If the Lord would be energy, we would all be also, energy. And experientially, again, this depends on how the person is receptive. Experientially, what we have seen that we get the highest pleasure from relationships. If we have $1 million and we are in the middle of a forest, then they are not even worth the paper they're printed on. We have a mountain of gold and we are in the middle of nowhere. That mountain of gold is useless. So anything and everything that we have becomes useful only when we are around people, right? So the highest pleasure, of course, the pain also is there because this is material world, but the highest pleasure we get is in personal interactions. That is a reflection of a relationship with the Lord, because that is the ultimate pleasure that we get in having a relationship with Him. And relationship means two people. Has to be two. Can't have a relationship between energies. Has to be two people. Okay. So if there are no other questions, then we'll move on to verse 8. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Varam Vrinidvam Bhadram Vo Yuyam Me Nripanandanaha Sahardena Prathak Dharmas Tushtaham Sahardena Vaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear sons of the King, I am very much pleased by the friendly relationships among you. All of you are engaged in one occupation, devotional service. I am so pleased with your mutual friendship that I wish you all good fortune. Now you may ask a benediction of me."
So from this verse till verse 21 is the Lord's speech to the Prachetas. So we see that the Lord does not wait for the Prachetas to say anything. He simply, out of his affection for them, he starts away speaking. And in 2 verses, the Lord will be glorifying the Prachetas and the importance of Vaishnava Sangha. Right? So he appreciates 2 things in the Prachetas right away. He says that I very much appreciate your Sohardena. Sohardena means good friendship, affectionate friendship, and dharma, the fact that you're engaging in bhakti. These are the 2 most potent things: executing devotional service and the association of devotees. In the case of Prachetas, they were also brothers, but the Lord is not really considering the fact that I appreciate the fact that you brothers are together, but he's saying that Sohardena Dharma, that in one another's association, you are executing devotional service. That's the proof that Lord is giving himself. Somebody says that, where can you show me that the Lord appreciates Vaishnava Sangha? This verse shows that, right? So he mentions Sohardena twice in the verse for emphasis, right? So he mentions it in the 3rd line and the 4th line of the verse. So bhakti is pleasing to the Lord, but bhakti that is done in the association of devotees is even more pleasing, right? So that is why japa is pleasing to the Lord, sankirtan is even more pleasing to the Lord. Same activity, one is done in isolation or in solitary, the other is done congregationally. Now, we are of course asked to do the minimum of chanting solitary. That is that is for our purification. But the Yuga Dharma is Sankirtan, right? So he is more pleased by the service that is done with devotees and to devotees. This is because bhakti is not really between Bhagwan and Bhakta. Bhakti is essentially between Bhagwan and all the devotees. So sometimes you see, this is more in material settings, that if there is a powerful person, then somebody may approach the person directly. He will try to bypass everybody. The person is a prominent personality. He's surrounded by maybe his family, maybe his ADs, and the person may try to bypass all of them and try and establish a direct relationship with the person. And that is basically like material stage. But in a spiritual setting, one has a much better chance of approaching the Lord through his devotees. Now, one may say that there is a problem in this approach. While the Lord is perfect, the devotees may not be perfect. The devotees may have some good qualities and some devotees may not have some good qualities. So how does one develop a service attitude for other devotees who perhaps do not have good qualities? Right? So two ways to understand this. One is that the nature of love is that when it intensifies, it extends to beyond the object of love, and it expands to cover everything that is connected to the object of love. And so the example is given that a mother has intense love for the child, but that love is so intense that even if the child is not there and then she sees a garment, she might see a cap that was worn by the child, or she might see a toy, and that affection intensifies. In nectar of devotion, these are known as udipans, that even the object is not there, but something related to the object comes, and that acts as a trigger. So a disciple, he may have intense affection for the guru, but the guru is not there, so he takes the guru's paduka and he venerates the paduka as if it is the guru. So this is love expanding. So in the same way, when the devotees have genuine love for the Lord, it expands to include everything that is covered with the Lord. Like now, the disciple might say, the paduka is dirty, my guru is clean. The paduka is constantly, it was put in mud, it is worn out, my guru is effulgent, right? Or the mother might say that this toy has been completely broken and it's worn out. But just the fact that it is connected, that itself is the cause of the affection. So in the same way, those that have affection for the Lord automatically develop affection for the devotees, regardless of the qualities of the devotees. Now, devotees by nature have good qualities, but there are practicing devotees who may not have good qualities. Right? And there may be devotees who may have their own idiosyncrasies. We see in Vrindavan, right? So devotees who have different idiosyncrasies. But all these are overlooked because one does not see the devotee in isolation. One sees the devotee in connection with the Lord. Second way to understand this is that when a young boy falls in love with a girl, he only sees her as perfect, right? So the girl may have slightly crooked teeth, and the young boy will think, oh my God, when she smiles, then her crooked teeth make her look so charming. Right? Or she may have some other apparent imperfection. Maybe she talks a lot. And the young boy will say, oh, when she talks, it's so wonderful. That's because of the intense love the boy has for the girl. Later on, it might change, you might say. They might get married and he might say, she's always talking and giving me a headache. But that's because the component of love has diminished. But while it is there, all that he sees is perfection. Similarly, when the devotees, they regard other devotees, then any imperfection in the devotees are eclipsed by the primary quality that they have, which is the fact that they have attraction for the Lord. So when one looks at other devotee and he says, oh, this devotee is eating too much. And then he says, but he's eating prasad, kirtan, and he is always smiling, happy. So then that imperfection becomes insignificant. So Srila Prabhupada notes that even in spiritual endeavors in the very earlier stage, while there may be love for Krishna, there may not be love for other devotees. So when one is experiencing that, then symptomatically the person can understand that my love for Krishna is not strong. Because if it was strong, it would automatically, by the upper two the reasons given, it would automatically extend to the devotees. So Srila Prabhupada writes a purport that is actually very, very practical. And this is a purport that can be used in so many temple management meetings. Prabhupada says that that disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to their having different opinions and leaning towards material things. Right? So what is the cause of disunity? That they have material inclination. Then he says, actually in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. At first he says that they could have two different opinions. And then he says that if they were really in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two different opinions. So what does that mean? That everybody agrees with everyone? No. So there is only one goal, which is to serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some disagreement over service, such disagreement is taken as spiritual. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstances. Why cannot they be disunited? Not because they are always agreeing with each other, but because they are unified in their goal. That you have to reach a particular point. Whether you use path A, path B, path C, there can be disagreements over there. It is not considered as disunity, as long as they're unified in the conception that we have to serve for the pleasure of Guru and Krishna. So that's why Prabhupada says that they cannot be disunited in any circumstances. And then he says, this makes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very happy and willing to award all kinds of benediction to his devotees, as indicated in this verse. So this is actually a benediction that Prabhupada is giving, even though he's being humble and saying that the personality of Godhead. But on the strength of this verse, on the strength of the assurance by the personality of Godhead, Prabhupada is giving this benediction. Right? That if you are united, you will make the Supreme Personality of Godhead very happy. And he will be willing to award all kinds of benedictions. Right? So let's see. We'll do one more verse and then we'll pause for discussion. Verse 9. Yo no smarati sandhyayam yushman anudinam naraha tasya bhratrasvatma samyam tatha bhuteshu saurdam.
The Lord continued, those who remember you every evening or every day will become friendly with their brothers and with all other living entities.
So we see that in the previous verse, the Lord had used Sordam twice. In this verse, he again uses it. In the last line, Tatha Bhuteshu Sordam, friendliness. Right? In the previous verse, the Lord had said to the Prachetas, I'm pleased by your friendliness, ask me for any benediction. Now, because of his extreme pleasure, he does not even wait for them to ask, and he begins to offer benediction. So what is the first Falshruti of the pastime? One who remembers the Prachetas regularly will develop qualities like them. What kind of qualities? Bhratrashu and Bhuteshu. So Bhratrashu means friendliness with brothers, and Bhuteshu is with other living entities. Right? So that's why I said this is an important verse for management, because temple management, because there are always disagreements. And when there are disagreements, it's a good idea to meditate on this Falashruti, to discuss the pastime of the Prachetas. So if you remember in the first canto, there is the famous Atmaramanas Muniva, right? Where the qualities of the Atmaram are being described, or the qualities of the Lord have been described, and it's said that the qualities of the Lord are so transcendental that they even attract the Atmaramas. So the Atmaramas are those who are self-satisfied. Atmaramas. Atma means self, and Ramas means taking pleasure, right? So they take pleasure in the self. So they have no need of anything. But the qualities of the Lord are such that they even attract the Atmaramas. Right? In the very next verse, Sutta Goswami, he talks about Sukadev Goswami, that Sukadev Goswami was not only transcendently powerful, he was also very dear to the devotees of the Lord. Right? So he's describing this as a distinguishing character to glorify the speaker of the Bhagavatam, that he was very dear to the devotees of the Lord. Which means that to the extent that we love Krishna, to that extent, we also love his devotees. Which means conversely, to the extent that we are not able to love the devotees of the Lord, we should understand that we do not have love for the Lord. Sometimes people say, how do I know I'm advancing in bhakti? Right? Prabhupada sometimes would say, how attracted you are to your chanting, or how is your barometer of material attraction going. So different symptoms. This is another symptom that is described, that to the extent that you're attracted to the devotees, to that extent you're attracted to the Lord. If you find that you're becoming averse to devotees, you should understand that your bhakti is suffering. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, when it talks about the different stage of advancement, like Kanishta, Madhyam, and then the Mahabhagavat, how is it described? In terms of how that person is interacting with devotees. Like the Kanishta does not know how to behave. The Madhyam, he knows how to discriminate. And he gives obeisances to the more advanced associates and gives mercy to the less advanced. And then what about the Mahabharata? He considers everybody directly as connected to the Lord and therefore superior to him and gives obeisances to him. He respects everybody. So in the previous verse, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he had defined unity as that the unity of the individual souls attempting to satisfy the Supreme Lord is real unity, right? Unity in goal. That what is their goal? That they're united in serving the Supreme Lord. Now, this does not mean that they're all serving the Lord in the same way. What it means is that with all the differences, they come together to serve the Lord. That's why Prabhupada would say to his disciples that your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate with one another. As a representative of Krishna, Prabhupada was basically making the same point, that just like a love for Krishna is shown by how much we are united, same thing is shown in terms of our love to our Guru. In the material world, there are different interests. So even though the path may be the same, the interests may be different. There may be people who are united, all of them want to become expert programmers. So they're all working very hard. They're all in the same path, but their interests are different. One person wants wealth for himself, another person wants fame for himself, different interests. In spiritual endeavor, the paths may be many. Somebody is studying the Shastras, somebody is worshipping the deities, somebody is cleaning the temple, but there is a commonality in the goal. So that's why in the former there will never be unity, even though the service may be identical, and in the latter there will always be unity, even though the execution may be done differently, right? So for a new devotee, the way of working is higher than the goal of the work, right? That's the characteristic of a neophyte. So if the way of the work is questioned, they become offended. Like if a person is distributing books, he's attached to that distribution of the book. That is higher than the goal, which is pleasing Prabhupada. And somebody says, "Prabhu, you're just wasting your time distributing books," the person becomes angry. But for a mature devotee, the goal of the work is more important. Somebody says you're distributing books, it's a waste of time. Person says, okay, what can I do that can help me serve Guru and Krishna better? Right? So the attachment is to the goal. That's why the unity is of the purpose. So the 10 prachetas were together for 10,000 years in the service of the Lord. So the Lord is glorifying this quality of friendly relationships between them. So simply by meditating on the prachetas, one can develop similar qualities. Okay, I'll pause over here. I think I may be a little bit over time. I apologize for that. Any questions or comments? For a few minutes, we can talk.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, just a comment on what you said about the love for Prabhupada will be tested. I think this verse is, as you said, is where this Prabhupada derived this powerful statement. It seems.
I wouldn't be surprised. I was myself very much taken in by these two verses.
Thank you. Beautiful preaching and for the unity of ISKCON.
I agree. Okay, any other thoughts?
If nobody else is there, can I
Sure, Prabhu.
pick your thoughts on this? The management question, actually. it's not a easy to answer. Some of them are, but very generally, principle wise, how do we distinguish between simply having difference of opinion in a particular service versus a much more serious problem of disunity? Because sometimes it appears even the difference of opinion looks like a disunity. So how to draw the line, saying that okay, this simply a difference of opinion, we can come together on this, but this is a disunity, we have to do something about it. So any practical points on this?
Sure, Prabhu. Good question. So the verse gives us a glimpse that if there is unity of in the goal, then disunity in the execution is okay. Right now, maybe it's easier said than done, discerning that there is unity in goal, right? Because even if the person may present different, saying that this is what the goal is. Like one of the most common thing that happens in ISKCON when there are disagreements is people go and pull out Prabhupada quotes. Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that, and there are quotes that are there in both the sides of the debate. Like Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that. Notwithstanding that, so I have and obviously, because I have been around for a long time, a relatively long time in ISKCON, I've had my shares of having disagreements with devotees and service. One thing is to separate the person from the problem. That the disagreement is about a service, it's about a tattva, a scriptural, it's about something, but not the person. That's something that helps a lot. That separate the problem from the person. When you do that, then you're giving yourself a lot of protection. So when the problem is separate, now you're at liberty to beat up the problem. You can treat the problem anyway. The problem has no shakti. Like you can blaspheme the problem, your devotional life is going to be intact. If it is connected to the person, that's when there is the risk. The second thing is that because I am neophyte, because early stages of devotion, that's why I made that point that when devotees are in the early stages, then they're unable to prioritize the service over the Lord, right? So in that case, the best thing is to associate with like-minded people. So if as a devotee, your inclination is to deity worship, best thing is to associate with people who do deity worship. I had this experience myself that once, so there was a traveling book distribution party. So there were young brahmacharis, very, very powerful book distributors. And because I was eager to learn a little bit, I went along with them. And by nature, their mood is very passionate. So when they were distributing books, they were basically, it was almost like they were on a hunting party. They were like, go after there, go there, go there. Did you get this? Did you get that? Did you corner that person? How much did you hit that person for? You could have squeezed out a few more dollars. For a while, I was like, I was getting really bewildered. That here, book distribution, highest service, Prabhupada's mercy, the giving, etc. It was a whole different level there. And then after that, I realized that it's just that the moods were so different. They were serving Prabhupada much better way than I was. They were giving his books out by hundreds, right? But the moods were very much different from mine. So for my own safety, better not to associate with them. Right? This is just my personal, I'm sure you have your own.
Sure, Prabhu. No, I like the point that you made. Dissociate the problem from the person in order to solve the problem, which is I think that I will take that as a tip in my in whatever I am doing now. I'm just dealing with some of the issues here, so I'm just trying to. This is a very wonderful topic for me now. So thank you.
Krishna have mercy. Okay. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti vaishnavim ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.